All right. Now you do another self-assessment on the knowledge of the topic. You know, when you are doing your postgrad degree at the beginning, you know very little about the topic, but you read and read and read and you know more and more about the topic. By the time you finish your master's or PhD, you should know more about the topic than your supervisor. Unless you are replicating studies conducted by the supervisor, then you have to compete and see whether you get close to your supervisor's knowledge on the topic. But otherwise, you should grow in that knowledge. So now I have 4 questions for you on the knowledge of the topic of your research, whether you are doing postgrad or doing you are lecturers doing your own research. You see, now I don't want to ask you to give me the answers, but you know for yourself. Number 1, do you have enough related findings on your topic? If you have enough findings, it means that you have done a good search of the literature. It is very important to have enough findings. Now you can ask me, what if my topic is so new? There are not enough findings on my topic. That's why I can defend a gap of knowledge. Okay, yeah, I didn't say exactly on your topic. I say related findings on your topic. Related. So it could be not exactly the same, but related. And therefore, you can say that they are doing this other line of inquiry, but I am studying this. They're doing this other line of inquiry, but this other line of inquiry is less studied. So therefore, studies need to be conducted, and why? But you need to have enough related findings because you need to prove that you know the knowledge of the field. Now that is the first level. You have the findings. Second, do you understand the related findings very well? You need to understand it inside out. It is very crucial because when we are talking about a robust paper, basically we are talking about a very robust introduction and discussion section. The method section, the result section, sometimes there's only that much you can do there. After all, the method basically describe what you did, and the results you describe what you found. There is not that much things that you can make it so outstanding. Of course, we're not talking about the lousy ones. Lousy ones, yeah, they make it outstandingly lousy, okay? But we're talking about moderate. When these two are moderate to good, the difference is not that great. Now, what makes a paper robust is the introduction and discussion. And this is when number 2 is very important. We understand the related findings very, very, very well. You know, for that paper on the personal pronouns, I probably had only 30 articles. There weren't that many on personal pronouns in the lecture context. In that 30, not all are very, very relevant, but 10 of them were very relevant, and I probably read them 30 times, each paper 30 times in the process of writing the paper. So, and until I understood everything inside out, I believe, yeah, I understood it so well. Later, I will show you example why I can prove to you I understood their study so well. Okay. And then what else I want to tell you? Number 3, can you explain why their results are similar or different from yours? Now, similar or different. I have examined a master's student's work. He happened to work on a topic that is quite common, and there was already a measurement scale out there, so it made life very easy for him, and so many studies. So in his discussion, he just said, oh, my findings are similar to A and B, different from C and D. Basically went on this way, but cannot explain why they are similar or why they are different. So this is not good. Not just saying they are different or similar. You must know why. You may not know precisely why, but we need to go back and look at their papers and see what kind of people do they study, or what kind of text did they analyze. If they study people, what age group are they, and other defining characteristics, because that could explain the differences. If this is a primary school students doing something versus uni students doing something, urban students doing something, rural students doing something, it could explain the differences in the findings and also the method used. Like language use questionnaire, when you report attitudes towards certain languages A and B, you have to look at the instrument used. Are they using questionnaire, direct method, or they're using indirect method, the match guys technique? It will give different results, even though both are used to study language use. That's why when we read other papers, we need to know some detail about how they did the study and how they analyze it. Then we can explain why the findings ours might be possibly different from theirs or the same. We cannot say for sure why it is the same or different, but we can postulate reasons. The number 4 is really for us to state in the conclusion, why are our findings such a great contribution to knowledge in the field? Now, this part connects to our writing skill. Just now I said, that's the aim and objective of the study. Go through all through the paper. Now, when we talk about great contribution to the topic, we have to go back and look at what we wrote in the introduction. Look at that gap of knowledge that we try so hard to create. This great contribution have to fit that gap. It is not going somewhere else, because after writing 8,000 words, we already forgot why we started the study. It cannot. It has. You go back and look at that gap, and then this has to tie into that. If that gap there now doesn't look nice, then rewrite it. The paper is in your hands. Your thesis may be done. It's okay. The paper is in your hands. You are taking part of the data. You rewrite the gap. I often do that because now the data is not the whole set like your thesis. When you take a section, the gap will be different. It cannot be exactly the same. Okay. Writing a good introduction, I just run you through this. This is from a book that I came across when I was a master's student in UPM by Westbird and Bucher, 1990. This one page actually changed the way I wrote my own introduction. I can read through this to guide you through the thinking of it. You don't need to understand deserts. You just need to understand the flow of thoughts, because this is written in a way for the sciences. So the introduction is very concise. And actually, if the journal paper wants both introduction and literature review, the introduction should go like this, very concise. But for myself, when I can, I normally just write introduction and no literature review section. I use the literature to show a gap of knowledge, more or less like what is here. Okay, so this is talking about how rubbish and insects are distributed in a desert ecosystem. So it starts with saying the broad area in most deserts of the world, there are dry areas and there are areas with water, and when there is a rain, it washes everything into the water areas. So this causes the dead plants and other things to be distributed differently after a rain. So number 4 is important. Therefore, before the dynamics of desert ecosystems can be adequately understood, the spatial relationships must be clarified. Must understand what is the relationship between all these insects and this rubbish redistribution. Now, number 5 goes for the gap in knowledge. There have been few studies of litter distribution and on soil fauna in any of the world deserts. Then they cited a few studies. Then they give example, just like just now I gave the Loya Plaza and I gave the Cowhead protest. So you give a few examples. Of course, the real one can be longer than this. This is enough to do the job to teach us how to write this. Okay, number 8, the next section. In the Chihuahuan Desert, this is moving closer and closer to the researchers' own study. We first described the spatial relationship for many groups of organisms, but soil microanthropods remain unstudied. The lack of such information represents a gap of knowledge. So as part of our continuing program of studies, we designed this study here to understand whatever. This is announcing the aim of the study. So this one illustrates very clearly how to write a good introduction or a research problem. There are actually steps here. Okay, this all goes back to my trial and error in learning how to write journal papers that are good. Having done a PhD in the University of Queensland and completed it in the year 2001, when I came back to UNIMAS to work in 2002, I still had one paper that I had not finished. Eventually, in 2003, I decided to submit the paper. I mean, I work at it and submit. But it's very strange. After the PhD, I just came back and worked and completely kind of forgot about how to write papers. And I have to figure out all over again how to write the introduction. And how to do the discussion. It is not the same because writing a thesis, we write, we show the supervisor, they give comments with like sometimes half thinking, half not thinking, but guided along until the thesis is produced. But when it came to the paper, I was on my own. A discipline is one thing, but eventually I decided that paper has to come up. So I try to learn the introduction. It's not that easy like what I show you just now. Yes, referred to that, yes, but I think at that point I also forgot to refer to this until there was a speaker who came from New Zealand. He gave a talk and he talked about these cars. This is creating a research space. Swell's 1990. Oh, after that, I went in and read more of Swell's writing, and it gave me a formula how to do the introduction, and it made life much easier for me. I tell you, in those days, even until 2006 and 7, when I wrote my paper, as I sit at the computer and write the introduction has a life of its own. I wanted it to end close to my aim and objectives of the study, but it can go sideways and go another place. And then tomorrow I come back and look, hey, it's getting very far away from my aim and objective. It went somewhere else. So it got a life of its own. It can grow and walk. No good. But once I train myself to go with this, I am okay. I can train myself and it will move towards the aim and objectives of my study. And actually, I put up hanging on my wall a long piece of paper. One part of it is this one for the introduction. I also have 2 pieces of paper on the method. It actually tells me what should go in. I also have a piece of paper on the conclusion. It tells me what should go in. Of course, it doesn't tell me how I should do discussion or results. That one we have to figure out. So writing a good discussion. Okay, I want to share my writing or discussion here. I told you that I understood 10 papers inside out. So of course, I remind you again of the topic, which is on personal pronouns for student engagement. Okay, you see, from of course, you start from your own findings. My finding is personal pronouns I, we, you, they are frequently used. 2.5 pronouns per minute, very, very frequent. This is in the lecture introduction. So I say it is interactive. Now, this is calculated based on average number of pronouns per lecturer. So when I calculated like that, the arts lecturers are very interactive. Arts people talk a lot. So when they talk a lot, they also use more pronouns. So if you calculate how many pronouns lecturer A use, lecturer B use, the arts use more than the science. Okay, now I use a different computational method. I use frequency per 1,000 words. This is a bit like calculating percentage, which is per 100. But because there are so many personal pronouns, so we calculate out of per 1,000. That somehow seems to be the convention. Now the science lecturers are more interactive because they use it in a more compact way. They use a lot of pronouns in maybe one sentence, for example. So you see the method of calculation is different. And because I suddenly saw that, I could explain why their results are similar or different from mine. But I also let the reader know that I know which one is the more common one, and I have used the more common one. Although I say that certain are very basic, they only use percentage and raw frequency, especially Rounds, who started this kind of research in 1987. That was so long ago. So she only used raw frequency. Later, they use percentage in like 04, 05, 09. In fact, the per 1,000 words also already emerged around 04, 09, 05. Yeah. Hey, sorry, that is going back. So I say in my study, I use the more common method, and the science lecturers turn out to be more interactive. And with this, then I could then compare with other people, who say science more interactive, that one more interactive, and so on. You have to look at the measurement. That's why it's very important. You have to go back to the paper, study it again, and see what is being reported. Then we can understand this interactivity better. Of course, I also compared with the interactivity kind of findings based on questions, and then found more contradictions. So I have to remind the readers that, hey, personal pronoun and questions are two measures of interactivity, but they are not the same measure, because now that we are talking about apples and oranges, cannot compare fairly already, although both give vitamin C. So this is to show you that when I write discussions and if I know that I can understand other people's findings inside out, I know my standard is already ISI paper. If I feel that I don't still quite understand, I only pretend to cite, I know it is not quite there, I wouldn't send to ISI, because I think the reviewers will be able to find out other weaknesses because I don't understand the area so well. So this is in the conclusion. I will not bring you through all this, but I also review that even though along the way, we don't just study you for referring to one person, or you for referring to the whole group, or we for referring to myself, or we for referring to me and other people. Eventually, I think you just need two groups, no need 5 reference, even though it seems so fantastic to divide them. This is just my little contribution to the method. But that paper had great contribution also partly because my student analyzed the different stages of the lecture introduction. So we put the personal pronouns into the different stages. Now the different stages were kind of studied by other people, but not in the same manner. So her staging were really novel and new. So that was the contribution, but I don't want to put all these things here for you to read. You can always read the paper. Well, it's a paper I'm proud of. It is not easy to get into English for specific purposes. Since then, I have tried to get in again, cannot, because the reviewers are very good. Cannot bluff them.